What is going on, Governor? It's Chisgule here, and today we're going to talk about recent happenings in the Rise of Kingdoms community, really significant implications for the community program of which we are a member. And yes, we still are a sponsored creator for Rise of Kingdoms. We're making daily videos. We'll be resuming that really soon once we have permission again. So like and subscribe if you're into that. We've got a really interesting topic today, which is to cover these recent happenings in the Rise of Kingdoms community. If you're in the Rise of Kingdoms official Discord, I'm sure you've been seeing kind of what's been going on. However, we're going to talk about three things today in order to have a meaningful conversation about what's been happening. The first is that we're going to talk about what it means to be a sponsored creator for a game in general. The second is that we're going to talk about what it meant to be and means to be a sponsor creator for Rise of Kingdoms. And then lastly, with all of that context, we're going to talk about what happened in Rise of Kingdoms that is significant and is now changing the way the community program works. So the first thing we need to talk about is what it means to be a sponsor creator for a game. Generally, that means the creator is getting some combination of special access or information that they can share with the community, some amount of in-game compensation, and some amount of financial compensation. This is in part because the amount of time that goes into content creation is really astronomical. It's like I spend an average of 4 hours a video, which sounds insane, but when you factor in the editing and the idea generation and creating the actual content itself, and then posting it and publishing it and answering comments and the whole 9 yards, it's really staggering, right? So it's really almost like a hat tip. It's like a teeny amount of money compared to how much a content creator could have made doing their primary profession, right? It's a fraction of what they could have made doing their primary profession and then reinvesting that money in the game. So that combination of things is typically what it means to be a sponsored creator. And I've been approached by a number of organizations that I've ultimately turned down to cover their games, in part because I've personally doubled down at this time on Rise of Kingdoms. So now let's talk about what it means to be a sponsored creator for Rise of Kingdoms, right? So to be a sponsored creator in Rise of Kingdoms meant that I got some amount of compensation in the form of in-game stuff and some amount of compensation in the form of money. And this is important to distinguish actually different types of in-game compensation, because there's really, I think, two different types of in-game compensation you could get. One is periodic infusions, which are kind of like a paycheck. It's kind of like getting a regularly scheduled paycheck. And the other is getting getting some infusion based on something that is happening or on request. That's the other type of infusion you could get. This is an important distinction we're going to need to clarify and talk more about in a moment. So these infusions, by the way, are intended to make educational content to showcase how the game works. The challenge with a game like Rise of Kingdoms is that actually this is a war game, and people lose troops. And so they lose resources, right? And that has real meaning for the investments that other players have made. And this is also important context for what's happened in the Rise of Kingdoms community and why this video is being made today. But I personally never used my infusions, my in-game paycheck, in a way to try to win events that would take sculptures away from what other players could make. I'm not saying I didn't occasionally, win an event, but I'm saying that I, with those resources, could have potentially been hunting for big, mighty governor wins, and I never did that. Because to me, it felt like, even though that was sort of my paycheck, I didn't want to use it that way. That was my choice that I made. This, of course, is evidenced by my kill count at 14 million. That's a joke for a player with my power level, right? That's a joke. So I've not been out for blood. I've not used my resources in a way, and I've minimized the extent to which I've used my resources in a way that would harm other players, even though that was my in-game paycheck. And the majority, by the way, of my compensation was those in-game paychecks. That was the thing that made it interesting to be making content on a regular basis over, for instance, just doing work in my primary profession and then putting all the money into my in-game account. I mean, like, if I had worked in my primary profession and put the money into the game, like, my power level would be way higher than what it is right now. And I intend that to make the point that the in-game infusions are a part of what make it compelling for a content creator to create the content. Because it is a huge investment of time, and I enjoy doing it, right? I totally enjoy doing it. I love interacting in the comments. I love when folks are in my Discord and we chat about stuff. But it is a pretty massive investment of time, and that makes it a very rewarding, both personally, but also like it makes it a meaningful compensation for the level of effort that goes into it. And so now we need to shift gears a little bit and talk about what happened in Rise of Kingdoms. Because we talked about the idea of periodic infusions that you get on a regular basis. It's like a paycheck. And those infusions in a perfect world really ought to look exactly like what you can already buy in game, right? They ought to look like that, except that as a content creator, a part of what we're here to do is to create content that helps people understand, like, should I invest in this commander or that commander? Like, how do I use my speed ups? How do I do this? How do I do that? And that doesn't always reflect the different packs that are available. And so although I can't specify exactly what the in-game compensation was, that in-game compensation helped me to showcase some legendary commanders in action. And doing so, I think, has been helpful to the community in order to figure out, like, what commander should I play with, right? Which commander should I invest in and put my precious sculptures into? The challenge now, and the thing that happened in the Rise of Kingdom community program, that's this reason we're making this video, is that one of the creators was in a big war, and they requested an infusion that would help them do well in the war, right? It was related to waging war. And that is something that I have never requested. It had never even occurred to me to request something like that. Comedically, there was a point in time in which I had been threatened that my account would get zeroed by another player in my kingdom, and I had sort of 5 days to live. And I was sort of explaining that experience to the devs and saying, like, what a tough situation when you have invested, thousands of dollars and you, like, can't switch kingdoms. You're just stuck with whatever you're in. And if someone just wants to zero you, like, what can you do? You're just going to live in a peace shield, right? Like we had this conversation around, like, kingdom transfers should at some point be a thing, right? And then we had this whole conversation. And at no point were the devs like, do you need anything? Do you want anything? Right? We had this whole conversation, and then, like, a week later, the only follow-up was, hey, how'd that go? Did you end up getting zeroed? Right? So the focus was not on that type of infusion, never asked for it, never thought to ask for it. But in this case, it was asked for, and it was also given, which subsequently Lilith has indicated, like, that was a mistake. We should not have interfered because this is a war game, right? So the nature of a war game is that actually one player getting a bunch of stuff means that they can harm another player. And that is where this kind of started to really upset people, that this had happened, because that information was made public. It was ultimately leaked that had happened, and people got really, really upset, and that's totally, very understandable. But that upset started to get confused with the other types of payment that a content creator gets, right? So getting those regular payments of in-game stuff instead of out-of-game stuff, which by the way, right, it's very beneficial for the developer to be giving in-game stuff, which sort of doesn't cost them anything to give, compared to money, which could instead go towards hiring a software developer, for instance, right? Like, as much as possible, a developer wants to compensate with in-game stuff rather than cash that could be used in other ways that in-game stuff cannot. So folks in the community started to call into question both, hey, that was not okay to have the wartime infusion, and these periodic infusions are also unacceptable because it makes things unfair. And what I want to point out about the unfairness is that, like, truly, if I had just worked in my primary profession and reinvested the money with the amount of time I had spent, like, this account, I mean, double, triple, quadruple the power. The amount of time in content creation is just absurd, right? 6 months of an average of 4 hours a day. Like, you can do the math. It's staggering. So, but I enjoy it. Like, I do it because I enjoy it, and for me, it's just a lot of fun to do. But this idea that those in-game infusions on a periodic basis are unfair, like, I understand why people feel that way, um, but I just wanted to present that counterpoint that, like, well, like, or I could have had a much more powerful account doing other stuff, and no one would have the content. But this is fine. What the content creators have agreed to, a group of content creators have agreed to, is we've said, take back the stuff. Completely remove the idea that it's not a level playing field. Completely remove it. So that moving forward, we can all play the game and no one feels like we've got some unfair edge, because it undermines our victories that are hard fought and hard won. And I don't want an asterisk next to my victories, right? I don't want, like, won the war but had in-game infusions. Fine. Let's not have any of that anymore and take what was given, even though that was my primary form of payment for this duration of time. Take it. And now, like, it's really clear it's a level playing field. This costs Lilith more ultimately if they want to give equal compensation in terms of dollars that we then, I guess, reinvest into the game should we so choose. But now everybody can feel like it's a fair playing field. And I'm comfortable with that because, like, again, I want no you won but next to my name when my alliance, when my kingdom, when I personally have victories. And so that is the thing that's going to happen over, I don't know, the course of the next couple of days. It may already happen by the time this video goes live. And then from there, hopefully the content creator program continues and I'm making daily videos and we're back to business as usual and everybody feels like things are fair because the field has been completely leveled, wholly and completely. So this is kind of a long video. There's a lot of stuff in here. Ultimately, I am tremendously excited to be making videos for Rise of Kingdoms. I feel incredibly fortunate to have this opportunity to share my experience playing the game, to share the best information that I can possibly come up with from my experience with different commanders, from my experience in war, from my experience farming resources like a madman, because that's still a thing I've been doing, and to be able to help folks make decisions about what it is that they personally want to invest in the game and know that moving forward, when we're investing money, like, it's us investing money from a leveled field. So I'm sure you've got questions. I want to point out that I have said no less than 100 times this week that I can no longer I can't comment on this issue until I've been given permission. But I also don't want this to be a thing that I dwell on because this has really been a harrowing experience. I totally get why people might feel like those in-game payments on a regular schedule are sort of cheating. Hopefully this helps illustrate a little bit that it's like an honest form of payment. But, like, it's all going away anyways. It's being removed from my account so that we're on that level playing field. And I'm looking forward to what happens next in Rise of Kingdoms, my friends. KVK is just around the corner. I'm excited that I can come out in the open about this because I feel like now I can go engage in diplomacy across kingdoms with, like, nobody wondering, like, you know, what's going on with Chisgule's account and our, KVK isn't fair and all that sort of stuff. Like, all of that's cleared up and gone now, right? Level playing field. Let's play ball. Let's play ball. But P.S. if you're on my continent, like, let's talk. All right, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe. This is the one time I want to address this topic because it's just been dominating too much of my attention over the last few days. And I look forward to getting back to our regular schedule. You have fun smashing the king.